I'm 25 now, but this happened last January when I was still living in Bozeman, Montana. I was finishing up some credits and spent most of my weekends outdoors. A few friends from school, Sam, Tyler, and Chloe, decided we should do a winter hike before the spring semester really picked up. We chose a trail in the Gallatin National Forest. It's a pretty popular spot, usually well marked, and we'd all been there during the summer. We figured it would be a good 3-day trip. We had the right gear, or at least we thought we did. We had 0-degree sleeping bags, a 4-season tent, and plenty of dehydrated meals. We started the drive from Bozeman early on a Friday morning. We stopped at the small station with the 2 rusted pumps and the faded red awning on the way out of town to grab some extra white gas for the stove. The guy behind the counter didn't say much, just took my money and went back to looking at a newspaper. We reached the trailhead around 10 a.m. The parking lot was mostly empty, which wasn't surprising for a Friday in January. There was only one other vehicle there, a dirty white truck parked near the small brick building with the slanted roof that houses the pit toilets and the map display. The hike started out fine. The first few miles were through heavy timber, and the snow was packed down enough that we didn't even need our snowshoes yet. We were making good time. By about 3 p.m., we reached the spot where we planned to camp. It's a flat area near a creek, about 6 miles in. There's a small wooden shelter there, just a 3-sided structure with a green tin roof that the Forest Service maintains. We set up our tent inside the shelter to get some extra protection from the wind. The weather started to change around 5 p.m. The wind picked up and it started snowing pretty hard. We weren't too worried at first. We made some beef stroganoff over the stove and sat around talking about classes. But by 8 p.m., the wind was loud enough that we had to shout to hear each other. The snow was blowing sideways. We decided to just get in our bags and wait it out. The next morning, the snow hadn't stopped. In fact, it was much worse. We couldn't see more than 20 feet in front of us. We checked the GPS, and it showed we were exactly where we were supposed to be, but the trail was completely buried. We talked it over and decided that since the storm wasn't letting up, we should just head back to the car. It was only 6 miles, and even in deep snow, we figured we could make it in 5 or 6 hours. We packed everything up, which was a struggle because our fingers were getting numb. We started walking back the way we came. I was leading, using my compass and the GPS on my phone. We followed the general direction of the creek, which stayed to our left. We walked for about 2 hours. I was looking for a specific landmark, a large boulder that looks like it's been split in half by a tree, which is about 2 miles from the campsite. After 2.5 hours of heavy trekking through knee-deep snow, we saw a structure ahead. I thought it was the small brick building at the trailhead. I actually felt a bit of relief. But as we got closer, I realized it was the 3-sided wooden shelter with the green tin roof. We were back at our campsite. We all just stood there for a minute. Tyler asked if I'd accidentally walked in a circle. I told him that was impossible because I'd kept the creek on my left the whole time. If we had circled back, the creek would have had to cross our path, or we would have had to cross it. We checked the GPS again. The track showed a straight line from the campsite, then a weird gap where the signal must have dropped. And then the blue dot was right back on the campsite icon. We sat in the shelter for a bit to get out of the wind. We were a little frustrated, but we figured it was just the whiteout conditions messing with my sense of direction. We decided to try again, but this time Tyler would lead, and we'd use a physical map and a sighting compass. We waited about 30 minutes, ate some granola bars, and headed out again. We were very deliberate this time. We kept the creek to our left, just like before. Tyler was checking the compass every 50 feet. We were moving slower, making sure we didn't drift. The snow was coming down so thick it felt like being inside a white sheet. After about 2 more hours of walking, Sam pointed ahead. "Is that the parking lot?" she asked. It wasn't. It was the wooden shelter with the green tin roof. Our own footprints from when we left were already mostly filled in by the snow, but you could still see the rectangular imprint where our tent had been. This was when I started to feel actually uneasy. It didn't make any sense. We had been walking away from the shelter for 2 hours. Even if we were moving slow, we should have been miles away. Instead, we were exactly where we started. We hadn't crossed any bridges, hadn't climbed any major ridges that shouldn't have been there, and hadn't crossed the creek. Chloe was starting to get cold, and she was clearly getting anxious. We looked at our food. We had 3 Mountain House meals left and a few bars. We'd planned for 3 days, and this was the morning of day 2. If we didn't get out soon, we'd be out of food by the next morning. We decided to try one more time, but this time we wouldn't follow the creek. We'd go straight up the ridge to the east. It was a steeper climb, but it would take us to a higher vantage point where maybe we could get a better GPS signal or see a landmark if the clouds broke. We hiked up the ridge for an hour. It was exhausting. My lungs felt like they were burning from the cold air. When we got to the top, the wind was so strong it almost knocked Sam over. We turned south, heading toward where the trailhead should be. We walked along the ridge for another hour. Then the ground started to slope down. We followed the slope, thinking we were finally heading toward the valley where the road is. As the trees started to get thicker again, we saw a shape through the snow. It was the wooden shelter. We didn't even talk this time. We just went inside the shelter and sat down. It was about 4 p.m. and it was already getting dark. The storm was getting even worse. We decided we couldn't keep walking in the dark. We set the tent back up. We were all quiet while we ate one of the remaining meals, sharing it between the 4 of us. I stayed awake for a long time that night. I kept trying to figure out the geometry of it. How do you walk in a straight line for miles and end up at the same point without realizing you've turned? I thought maybe the wind was pushing us, or maybe the magnetic declination in this part of Montana was weirder than I thought. But the GPS failing at the same time was what bothered me. It wasn't just losing signal. It was like the distance wasn't being recorded right. Sunday morning, the snow finally stopped, though it was still overcast. We had 1 meal left. We decided that instead of following the trail or the creek, we would just walk through the woods in a perfectly straight line, using the trees as markers. Tyler would stand at one tree, I would walk to the next one in a straight line, then Sam would move past me to the next one. We'd leapfrog like that to ensure we weren't curving. We did that for 4 hours. It was incredibly tedious and slow. We were all tired and hungry. Around noon, we came to a clearing. I looked ahead, expecting to see the green roof of the shelter again. I was honestly prepared to just sit down and wait for a helicopter at that point. But it wasn't the shelter. It was the parking lot. We saw the dirty white truck and the small brick building with the slanted roof. We were about 50 yards from my car. We didn't run, mostly because we were too tired, but we moved as fast as we could. I got to my car, fumbled with the keys, and unlocked it. The engine took a second to turn over because of the cold, but it started. We sat there with the heat on full blast for 20 minutes before anyone said anything. On the drive back, we stopped at the shop with the outdoor gear display in the window and the green door near the edge of town. There was a guy there who looked like a local guide. I asked him if there were any weird magnetic spots or circular trails near that shelter. He just looked at me like I was crazy and said the trail was a straight shot in and out. He said maybe the snow just made everything look the same. I've thought about it a lot since then. I try to rationalize it. Maybe the wind was so strong that it was physically pushing us in a curve and we were too exhausted to notice. Maybe the whiteout caused a type of sensory deprivation that messed with our inner ears. But I can't explain the GPS. I looked at the data on my phone later that week. There's a 4-hour gap on Saturday where the GPS just shows a single stationary point at the campsite, even though we were walking the whole time. Sam and Tyler don't really talk about it. Chloe moved back to Oregon after the semester ended. I still go hiking, but I haven't been back to that specific trail. I tell myself it was just the weather and our own exhaustion. But honestly, I don't think I believe that. I think there was something wrong with the space out there that day, though I have no idea what it could have been. It's probably just a weird fluke of geography and weather that I don't understand. At least, that's what I tell people when they ask why I don't go up there anymore.